I want to talk about shame because A Course in Miracles talks a lot about guilt and the unconscious guilt that we carry, and guilt is always the term that you hear in Course circles. You have this section in your book on shame versus guilt, and I'm trying to see if I don't think I have the numbers in front of me, but you said that guilt is quoted in the Course or referenced to in the Course many, many times, and then there's only maybe a couple mentions of the term shame. So I'm wondering, and what you wrote about this was really fantastic because you said that shame research had not yet come into, I guess, the spotlight at the time that the Course was coming through Helen and Bill. So could you tell us about shame and guilt?
Absolutely. I think this is one of the more important things that I wanted to convey in the book. As a therapist, I'm what I would call a student of shame. My own psychotherapy was heavily oriented around identifying and working with shame. So this is something I really, really wanted to share. So basically, Helen and Bill scribed A Course in Miracles from 1965 to 1972. They couldn't write about iPhones. They couldn't write about social media. They couldn't address Obama or Trump because they weren't around at the time. In the same way, they were steeped in the world of Freudian psychoanalysis. And in that world, there was a tremendous focus on guilt, as thousands of papers had been written by the early 1970s on guilt. Shame wasn't really differentiated yet as its own sister emotion. And as of the time when I went through my residency, so that would be early 1980s, there were maybe 6 psychoanalytic papers on shame, and I doubt they got much airplay. So since then, of course, shame has come into its own. There are many people writing about it. I was heavily influenced by one of my mentors who I reference in the book. The simple distinction is that guilt is a reaction to something that we did, which afterwards we feel bad about. It caused harm to others. We wish we could take it back. And guilt we can make amends for, which is very important because A Course in Miracles, is all about recognizing that there's nothing to be guilty for. We thought we left God. We can't leave God. It's impossible. Therefore, what are we upset about? It would be as if you had a nightmare where you shot your mother or child and you woke up and you felt terribly guilty for the rest of your life for killing this person. No, it was a dream. Hopefully you have a difficult day and you let it go and you never think of it again after that. Shame is very different. Shame is a perception about the self based on things that happen, but sometimes just based on that existential feeling that we talked about before of I am not enough. Shame is always about inferiority, less than, whether in the world of competition, body type, she looks so much better, he's so much stronger, they're so much smarter. Shame thrives on comparison. And the point I was wanting to make is that we can't just focus on guilt, which is about actions, because the separation resulted in equal parts guilt and shame, if you will. In that, we did something that we thought was terrible. We thought we killed God by separating from God. And as I said, of course, we can't do that. But the moment we believe that we separate from God, we experience ourselves as we've never done before. We're suddenly a limited being. We'd never known limitedness before. We're suddenly in a body. What the heck is this thing? It can feel cold. It can feel warm. It gets hungry and thirsty. It has other appetites. It can be hurt and be in terrible pain. So all of a sudden, there is this whole, how to put it, part of our intrinsic self-concept begins to incorporate shame. All of those places where we expected ourselves to live up to a certain standard, a certain self-concept, and failed or believed we failed or were told we failed by somebody else. And if we are going to follow what we talked about a little while ago, which is, do nothing, undo everything. One of the ways to recognize what needs undoing is to be able to become aware of shame in our lives. It is everywhere, and the reason why it wasn't written about in the 60s is because it's an emotion that hides. The very nature of shame is to hide. If you think about a picture of someone who's deeply embarrassed, what do they look like? They're not making eye contact and staring at you. Their heads down, their faces turned away, maybe their hands are over their face. They want to disappear. They want to just be, engulfed and not have to face anything. So when we're in shame, there is an immediate cutoff from relationship that drives us deeper into that isolation and makes it harder to heal from shame. Shame produces more shame. I feel bad about that relationship. Oh my gosh, I'm going to turn away. I'm going to withdraw. I never want to talk to that person again. Now that person's wondering, why did they stop talking to me? I must have said something. They go into their own shame. They go, well, I don't know what I said, but I'm not going to go near her again. And we get these sort of vortexes of shame that go inward. In working with couples, part of what I would do is try to hold a mirror up to what I would call ricocheting shame, how something that one did or said completely inadvertently provoked shame in the other, and how that shame then rebounded and created more. But as course students, we are told to bring any darkness within us to the Holy Spirit. Well, the darkness wants to hide. The ego hides. Therefore, we want to begin to identify shame so that we can bring it forward. My mentor, who studied under a guy who was, I think, right up there with Sigmund Freud in terms of brilliance, but way beyond him in terms of love and kindness, someone named Sylvan Tompkins, who one of my patients actually was in a class of his and told just some lovely stories. I mean, this guy was a course student without knowing about the course. But he said the cure for shame is gradual exposure in a safe setting. We have to bring it into the light, but we can't do that at a pace that feels too much, or it becomes more shame provoking. If you think you have a bad voice and can't sing, and they shove you out on the stage of Carnegie Hall and say, sing, I promise you that will do nothing to relieve your shame or your anxiety. Whereas if in a small setting with a voice tutor who you really trust, where you're doing some basic exercises and you begin to say, oh, that wasn't so hard, now you can begin to overcome that shame. So we have to expose it, but we have to do it in a safe setting and only at a pace that's right for us. Once again, this brings us back to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's the only being that knows what the right pace is and is the ultimate safe setting. So wow. Shame in a nutshell.
Oh, that's so helpful.